also the same time in the 80s is kind of when computers are happening. And then probably without thinking, we're subconsciously comparing our brains to computers. But the brain is nothing like a computer. It's this weird piece of biology that does some things well and doesn't do other things well. And that's why your system works.
Well, now, and if you've read the new edition of Getting Things Done that I did a couple of years ago, I put a final chapter in there on the cognitive science research that's shown up since I wrote the first edition that's basically validated the fact that your head's a crappy office. Your brain did not evolve to remember, remind, prioritize, or manage relationships with more than 4 things. It does what it does brilliantly, which is use pattern recognition and long-term memory so that you're talking to a person instead of vibrations of light and sound. So you're doing that right, me too. That's a light, that's a flag, that's a camera, that's whatever, as opposed to vibrations of light and sound. We make sense out of these things brilliantly in the present, right? Because that's how we survived on the desert and the savannah and the jungles and whatever, in the present. That's a bear, there's a snake over there. Oh, there's berries to eat.
Right.
Yeah, we do that extremely well.
And this is purely an instrument of survival, isn't it, by definition?
And it does that extremely, and computers can't even come close to that yet.
Right.
They're starting to. They're trying to, but they can't even come close to knowing who you are and what you're thinking or whatever. And there's all kinds of stuff we do really well, but what we don't do well is remember, remind. Your brain is brilliant at all that stuff, but you go to the store for lemons and come back with 6 things and no lemons. What happened? You tried to use your head as your office. And most people probably watching or listening to this are still using their head as their office to try to remember, remind, prioritize, and manage relationships with the multiple things in the complexities of our lives. And how do I manage, might want to get a divorce with, I need cat food, with, we need to sell the house, with, I need to hire a vice president of marketing. And by the way, I just found out I got a major tooth infection. That's only 6. Add that, multiply that by about 20, and you'll have the typical person's life now. And it's all trying to be managed in here. Whereas if you literally wrote all that down on a whiteboard or somewhere, you'll have a whole different perspective.
Right. And we see people trying to do these things without necessarily knowing the exact methodology, the to-do lists and the get it all out. And some people write books just so they can move on and get the intellectual property out of their head. That's kind of something you described there.
And there's, even journaling, which is a much more subtle version of completion.
Right.
Even if there are times I've journaled a lot, sometimes I haven't done so much, but it's a lovely way to sort of clear the deck on a much more subtle level. Just freeform writing, can do that too. It's just externalizing it, so you get much more into the flow. I think it was Picasso who said, inspiration's for amateurs. It's called butt in chair, boot computer, hit key. If you're waiting to get inspired for the book, you'll never write it. You just need to write for an hour a day or 2 hours a day.
Get in there.
Butt in chair, to sit down, engage, get involved, and start to externalize your thinking. And then you'll find your thinking will mature and expand.